Well, this is week, I don't know what week it is in our observation beehive project, and I bet you've been wondering what has become of our bees. First, let me take you back to where we left off. Back in late May or early June, I began to notice that our bees were not progressing like they should. Something was slowing their progress. As it turns out, there was something about the setup or the layout of the observation hive that they were rejecting, and their progress had stopped, which is completely out of character for a colony of bees in the early spring. Then, suddenly, the activity within the hive became very anxious, and I knew they were preparing to swarm, to leave town. In a panic, I hastily transplanted the frames, bees and all, from the observation hive to a regular box hive. And that is where we left off. Well, after moving the bees to a box hive, they were quickly back on track and thriving. So, their issue was clearly that there was something about the setup of the observation hive that they didn't like. In mid-June, a friend told me about a huge colony of bees he had found in an abandoned freezer on his cattle ranch that is located just outside the town of Beaver, Utah. That's right, Beaver, Utah. He texted me some pictures of the bees in the freezer, and it was a challenge I could not refuse. Having absolutely no idea what to expect or what I was going to do, I decided to meet him on his ranch and see if we could possibly remove the entire colony of bees from the freezer, including their sheets of honeycomb, and transplant them into a box hive. It was then that I decided to also move our original observation hive bees to his ranch to test out that area in terms of honey production. I'm always looking for a good place to keep beehives, and what better place than Beaver, Utah? So I loaded up our observation hive, who were now happily settled into their box hive, and drove them to the ranch. Now, that was an experience. I literally drove a thriving live beehive for hours inside my Jeep Grand Cherokee. Unfortunately, it all happened so quickly and so unexpectedly that I didn't get any video. But the plan worked flawlessly, and off I went to move our bees to a new area and hopefully to capture a wild colony of bees out of a freezer and move them into a box hive. In case you don't know where Beaver, Utah is, well, first you must make your way through the booming town of Minersville, Utah, which makes Mayberry look like a metropolis. Just outside of Minersville, I quickly learned that they do not like California registered vehicles doing 85 miles an hour on their two-way road. And that cop wasn't buying the bees are in the back excuse. At the ranch, we were able to quickly unload the beehive from my car and get it set up. I opened the hive entrance, and our bees immediately got to work. We were losing daylight fast, and I hastily moved on to the second purpose of my visit to the ranch, the wild colony in the abandoned freezer. I opened the freezer door to have a look, and what I saw was incredible. It was huge. The sheets of honeycomb were massive and almost black in color from their years of repeated use. Honeycomb darkens over time as the bees use it over and over, year after year. This freezer had been home to this colony of bees for a long time. The comb was full of honey, pollen, brood, which is developing bees inside the comb. I removed the 3-foot-long sheets of honeycomb and trimmed them to fit inside the empty box frames so that the comb remained intact as much as possible, thus saving the bees the work to rebuild new comb and not killing thousands of developing larvae and wasting their honey. Then I placed a large rubber band around the frame to hold the comb in place, hoping the bees would eventually attach the comb to the frame. It was random, new territory for me, and yet it was one of the most amazing beekeeping experiences I have ever had. It was growing dark, and although you can't see it in the video, I was working with very little daylight left and shooting totally from the hip. I had never done anything this way. We cut every piece of comb out of the freezer and moved the bees to their new hive, only feet away from the freezer. I have a ton more video of the entire process, and I'll save that for another day. Yeah, they're getting mad.
I thought they went to bed.
Okay, would you go to bed if this was happening to your house?
Holy cow. I got 3 of them after me now.
Yeah, it's okay. They aren't gonna get you, I promise. And then
They're diving on me, Lance.
So, for the past 3 months, our original observation hive bees and the freezer transplant bees have been sitting on a cattle ranch in Beaver, Utah. Because of the distance, I haven't been able to check on the progress of either hive until last weekend. Expecting the worst and hoping for the best, I headed back to Beaver. As luck would have it, this has been one of the driest years on record in that area. Honey production is always directly related to rainfall. Because of the dry summer, I was expecting nothing. In fact, I was so certain that the bees would be starving that I had mixed up 5 gallons of sugar water to feed each of the hives. I first opened the freezer bees, and I was completely amazed. They were killing it. Those bees were thriving. They didn't have extra honey for me to take home with me, but considering what I had done to their home a few months ago, they had completely rebounded. And by next spring, they should be ready to kill it. On to the observation hive bees. I opened the hive expecting empty frames. And to my amazement, the top box was literally packed full of honey to the brim. Remember, I was expecting absolutely nothing, not a drop. I was just hoping they would be alive. And to see them thriving and actually busting out at the seams like that was so cool. I negotiated a deal with the queen of the hive, and she agreed to let me take the top box packed full of honey in exchange for my 5 gallons of thick sugar water. Done.
Wait! There's more!
My friend Tom, the rancher, told me that he had noticed a lot of activity coming from that old freezer. I figured it was just a few stragglers from earlier in the year who got lost and instinctively returned to their former home inside the freezer. For fun, we opened the freezer and look what we found. This is all brand new comb. I previously removed every piece of honeycomb from that freezer. There are a number of explanations for where this colony of bees came from. All I know is that this is what has moved back into the freezer. I will help them along, feeding them occasionally to make sure they survive the winter inside the freezer. Then, at the first sign of spring, you can bet that I will be back in Beaver, Utah, moving that huge, wild colony of bees from the freezer and into a box hive. We'll call them the freezer bees too. But when I come back, you can be sure that I will not be doing 85 miles an hour through Minersville, Utah. Fall is such a rewarding time as a beekeeper. There are few things in life more rewarding than watching the honey that your own bees produced flow out of an extractor, and nothing tastes better. So, from that single small honey box, we extracted 26 pounds of honey, 2.5 gallons. For 90 minutes, beautiful, sweet-smelling honey slowly flowed out of the extractor and through a double screen to be filtered. After honey frames are extracted, they're still very sticky with honey. We placed the sticky honey box and the frames out by one of our hives behind our house and let the bees lick the frames clean, leaving the honeycomb still intact. The bees licked the entire box completely dry. All that was remaining was frames of dry, extracted honeycomb, ready to be filled with honey next spring. Soon, we will bottle the honey and share it with our friends. So there you have it. Think for a moment about where we've been over the course of the last 6 months. We packaged a queen and 3 pounds of bees from a live hive in a commercial bee yard and brought the bees home. 3 days later, we installed the queen and the bees into the observation hive and watched them adapt and progress. We transferred the bees from the observation hive to a box hive. We moved the box hive hundreds of miles to a new home. We cut a wild colony of bees out of a freezer and transferred them into a box hive where they are now thriving. A new wild colony of bees magically decided to take up residence in the empty freezer, and next spring, they'll be ours. In spite of the slow and frustrating start by our observation hive bees, at the end of the summer, they gave us over 25 pounds of honey. And finally, we watched as sweet golden honey literally flowed out of the extractor. Honestly, can it get any better than that? Bees have been my passion for over 40 years, and even now I struggle to find the words to adequately describe what amazing creatures honeybees are. But if you really want to find out how un-BEE-lievable they are, you can check out my top-selling Amazon Choice book on Amazon. Yep. It's in the top 0.1% of books selling on Amazon worldwide. The United States, Canada, the UK, France, Italy, Germany, and yes, even Japan. This little gem is a hit. The book is loaded with cool facts for ages 2 to 102. Just read the reviews. Now you know.
We all know quite a number of people who have everything that it would take to be happy, and they are not happy because they want something else or they want more of the same. And we all know people